Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be having our weekly compilation of true, scary stories. I hope you enjoy them. So without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. This story happened about a year ago, but it still creeps me out when I think about it. That being said, it's a little lengthy, but I think it fits here. I'm an adult male with a tall build at about 250 pounds who lives with my dog. My neighborhood is considered one of the nicer ones in my city, but it isn't without its share of crime incidents. Most of these tend to be car break-ins, where people are looking for easy grabs left in plain sight. And, in the worst cases, the rare robbery of college students, not from the area, or people walking around who are otherwise not paying attention to their surroundings. Growing up, I lived in a much rougher part of the city, so being alert and observant of one's surroundings has always been second nature to me, especially at night. So much so that when my dog and I go for his nightly walk, he knows that it's all about the business of doing his business, and doing it quickly with no dilly-dallying. On this particular night, I was running late with a work project that had to be completed on time, and our walk was delayed about an hour past our regular time to 10 p.m. I absolutely hate going out too late. Already feeling anxious about missing our regular time, when other dog owners are out doing the same, something told me to make sure that I carry this time. So after I got my dog in his harness and out the door, we started our usual walk up the street, moving at a brisk pace. At this hour, the street is completely empty of pedestrians or car traffic, just eerily quiet. We get about halfway up the street before he starts sniffing around for a good area, when I spot a red pickup truck flying down the street well over the speed limit. The truck eventually comes to a screeching halt in the middle of the street, about 30 feet ahead of us. As soon as he hit his brakes, I quickly walked us a little further up, as to put a row of the sporadically spaced parked cars on the street in between us, and continue walking while maintaining eyes on the truck. As we walk by, the door opens and a guy gets out and is bent over coughing profusely, like a lot, and hacking up spit and whatnot in the middle of the street, while holding on to the inside of his truck door with tinted windows. My dog and I both keep eyes on the guy as we're walking past, about 25 feet distance from him. He then looks up at me while still keeping one arm inside the car door and says, "Hey, can you come here for a second?" Without breaking stride, I said, "Yeah, probably not going to do that," while rotating my body and walking backward as we pass him as to not turn my back to him. While still backing away on our path, I ask him what's wrong. He then says, "I'm not feeling well. Can you please just come over here?" While still backing away, I tell him no plainly, and that he can pull into any of the parking spaces on his side of the street and rest there until he feels better, or that I can call him an ambulance if he's really that bad off. Upon hearing this, his face contorted and went into a snarl. He was also suddenly no longer having coughing fits or under any sort of visible physical distress. Clearly angry that I wouldn't cooperate, he then slightly closes the door a little so that it's still ajar, but his arm that was behind it is concealed behind his back now, and he started towards us saying, "Please come here, sir. I told you that I'm not feeling well." I then clip my dog's leash to my belt and get parallel against the side of a large SUV parked on my side of the street, leaving about 20 feet between us. I also move my hand behind my back to my waistband and tell him that's close enough from behind the vehicle. He then stares at me, and I can literally see him working the math in his head on the chances of me bluffing, and he turns around and goes back to the truck, but doesn't leave. He reaches inside with the concealed hand and holds for about 10 seconds before he looks back at me over his shoulder and stares for 10 more seconds, only to see that I'm staring at him also. Haven't left my position next to the buffer vehicle, nor turn my back to him. He says something to someone else in the passenger seat who is obscured by the tent, and then very quickly hops in, slams the door, and speeds back off up the street into the night. So this happened to my mom maybe 3 years ago. My mom has now passed away, but she was maybe 40 at the time. She was a very pretty woman, looked young for her age. She often had total strangers propose to her. Everyone was pretty much obsessed with her. That being said, she was no stranger to dealing with creeps. So one day she was at Woodman's, the grocery store for those of you who don't know. It wasn't really in a bad area, but was close to a bad area and was right off the freeway, so it could be kind of sketchy. She always told me that she didn't want to be going there alone, especially at night. When I would go with her at night, I was not to leave her side, even though I was 18 to 20 years old at the time. So anyway, she was there during the day doing her grocery shopping alone. She noticed a man in the same aisle as her. He was looking at her, and when she would turn around and look at him, he would look away and act like he was looking at something on the shelves. Honestly, she didn't think much of it. As I mentioned, she dealt with her fair share of creeps. So she grabbed what she needed and moved on to another aisle. That's when she noticed him again, in the same aisle as her, doing the same thing. This time, it kind of rubbed her the wrong way, but she went about her business again and moved on. The man kept following her throughout the store. Now it's worth mentioning that my mom was not one to be messed with. She was very confrontational, never backed away from a fight, has beaten the crap out of men, taken beatings from men, usually carried a weapon, etc. So she's getting ready to check out and he's still following her. Now she's pretty angry and didn't feel safe leaving. She alerted an employee who went to get a manager. My mom took this opportunity to tell him off, saying something like, "Can I help you? What the heck do you want?" He replied to her saying, "You look like the kind of girl who would really look good in someone's basement." At this point, she was not only mad but absolutely terrified. The manager came, and while my mom was telling them about the guy and what he had said, he ran off. The police were called, and they were able to locate him in or around the building. They escorted him off the property, but that was all. My mom was so afraid that the guy was lurking somewhere, waiting to see her get into her car, and then proceed to follow her. She ended up calling me in tears, saying she was afraid, and if she was going to be followed or abducted, she wanted someone to know. So she and I stayed on the phone till she was home. It took a lot to shake or scare my mom, but she had really good intuition. So for her to be as shaken as she was, this guy had to be as creepy as they come. His comment to her only proved that further. In the end, she was okay. But I can't imagine what would have happened if she didn't tell someone, or if he did wait for her and follow her. This happened to me and my still current boyfriend about 2 years ago. We live in a city that has a main downtown area. The main city is pretty liberal, but once you get out into the county, it can become quite the opposite. That being said, the main city and especially the downtown area has a pretty bad homeless problem. That's only gotten worse over the years. For the most part, the homeless population is pretty harmless. They know the good spots to hang out. A lot of times they just smile at you and I always smile back, and you go on your way. Sadly, there's been an increase of incidents, infer what you will, in the last few years, with the rise of overdoses and more addictive street drugs. I was living in the main downtown area at the time, having just recently graduating college and wanting to be close to the nightlife. My best friend that I met in college and I were roommates. We had an apartment right in the middle of downtown. It was the perfect setup. My boyfriend, let's call him Jack, happened to live 1 block down, then about 5 or 6 blocks south of that. It was about a 10-minute walk, give or take. It was even closer to the heart of downtown as well, so you can imagine how convenient that made it for hanging out, and also not having to take a car and worry about parking. One overcast Sunday morning, my boyfriend and I woke up at my place and decided to walk over to his so that he could grab some things. We had walked the majority of the way. It really was just a straight walk on sidewalks the whole time. We were on the right side of the road with the street to our left. We're not 1 minute away from my boyfriend's place when I notice something ahead that makes me feel a bit uneasy. First off, there's a guy walking in front of us in the same direction we are with his back to us. I can see that he has both earbuds in. He's walking at about the same pace, so we aren't about to run into him or anything. In front of him, facing and walking towards all of us, is a different guy. He had a small frame, was maybe 5'8", wearing dark pants, a red sweatshirt with a hood up, and a backpack. Even though his hood was up, I could see his face. Some short black hair poked out, pale skin, and these black, beady, crazy eyes that I'll never forget. I assumed him to be homeless, as it was an area that was popular for them. Now, he wasn't looking at us, but rather the pedestrian with earbuds in who happened to be closer to him and in front of us. All of a sudden, I see the homeless guy run and quite literally rush the pedestrian in front of us. Like ran up and then stopped about a half foot from this poor dude's face. Since the guy had his headphones in, he probably just wanted to mind his own business and walk home quietly. He was clearly taken by surprise and stopped and took one of the earbuds out to see what the crazy dude wanted. Me, while I'm a risk taker, I didn't like putting myself in the wrong situation when I didn't need to be. This freaked me out, and I didn't want the guy to notice us and come up at us next. So I stepped left of the sidewalk into the street. There was a pretty big lane for street parking, and it was lined with parked cars, so I conveniently hid myself from behind view of a car. As I continued walking, I heard this guy start yelling obscenities at the poor pedestrian. Things like, "I'm gonna run you over with a car. I'm gonna find you." Like I said, we were not 100 feet from the entrance to my boyfriend's apartment at this point, and after witnessing that, I just wanted to be inside. My boyfriend had continued walking on the sidewalk, and in an instant, I had come back in view, and we turned right towards the apartment. Now, the apartment did have a main entrance from the street side on the sidewalk, but my boyfriend just moved in and didn't have the code for the front door yet. All he had was his fob to the parking garage that led to the stairwell up into the place. We were using that at the time to get in. We walked up to the parking garage door and clicked the button so it would start rolling up. I hadn't looked behind me at this point. I knew I probably should have, but a lot of times if you ignore the crazy people, for lack of better words, they will turn in and not bother you. So I was kind of following that tactic at the moment. The garage door was open and we went inside. My boyfriend clicked the button to close it. We started the short walk to the door to the stairwell. The garage door was nearly closed, and I don't know what prompted me to look back, but I did. And what I saw still gives me chills today. It was the homeless guy from the street. He was squeezing under the garage door while he still could. I remember the chill that ran down my spine as I locked eyes with his, and I yelled at my boyfriend, "Jack, he's following us." I'm not sure what I expected my boyfriend to do, but he pushed the door to the stairwell open and started running. That was his oh crap moment when I realized this guy had access inside, because the door to the stairwell didn't require a fob or even have a lock. Me, definitely not wanting to be the closest one to this guy, took off running after my boyfriend. As I pushed the door open and got inside, I could hear the guy behind me doing the same as it was swinging back closed. I looked back and locked eyes with this crazy guy once again, and about crapped myself as I realized my only option was to keep running and try to get inside our apartment and close the door before he got there. Yes, this guy was smaller, but what really freaked me out is since he had a backpack, I had no idea if he had a knife or gun in there. I mean, why else would you chase 2 people and outnumber yourself? My boyfriend lived on the 3rd floor, of course, So we proceeded to sprint up 3 flights of stairs. I could hear this guy's pounding footsteps behind me. At last, we got to our level and opened the door to the hallways and sprinted to his unit without looking back, unlocked that door as fast as we could, still felt slower than heck to this day, and slammed the door shut behind us. I remember looking through the peephole and expecting to see this guy standing there ready to yell at us, but nothing. My heart was pounding. I mean, what the heck just happened? We called the cops and told them what happened to us. I'll admit, they probably did all they could, but it didn't feel like enough. I was freaked out. This dude now had access to and was inside the building with access to all the apartments and residents. I just imagined him hiding in the stairwell for the next poor soul. Well, the cops came, drove around the perimeter of the complex for a few minutes, weren't able to search the inside of the building because apparently they didn't have access in, and for some reason we weren't allowed to let them in, and left after not finding anyone. It took forever to finally get the urge to leave that apartment to go to run our Sunday errands, but we did. I'm sure the guy was just high on drugs and decided to be crazy that morning and bother some unlucky people. He probably left after he realized he was screwed if people found him there, and someone else called the cops. I made this account to post here. Anyways, this happened around like 2021, and sometimes I still find it hard to grasp. For context, I now live in a different place, and along with most of my relatives, so I feel safer saying this on here. The reason I'm posting this is for people to learn and possibly caution themselves from my experience. I'd say the place I lived in was just pretty old. It wasn't densely populated nor empty. It had wooded areas around it. You could cycle to the mall, school, and other normal places, but you'd have to take a car to go to places like a hospital. I was basically in my last year of high school. Being an only child and a girl on top of that made my parents very overprotective, and I was naturally more cautious than the rest of my friend group. I didn't really mind being that way though, because I always thought that that was the better option. So, teenagers from school would have these outdoor get-togethers in the woods a few kilometers away from my school. It was just common for people to lounge out and about, chilling till 3 a.m. or something like that. Including me, it was a group of 4. They decided since it was our last year, we should probably drink together in the woods. Obviously, looking back, it was a really stupid idea, but it wasn't unsafe, and it wasn't deep in the woods either. There's a pretty clear trail and a small openish area where people would get their dogs and whatnot like that. We planned to do it on a Thursday because my parents would be out, and the rest would convince theirs that they were having a sleepover. Now, we had bought the alcohol and some other stuff to just chill out. There were no others that day because it was a weekday, and quite chilly as well. It was pretty lively. You could see houses from the distance, and people would be driving around and all, so naturally we felt safer. We walked on the trail for about a minute when I felt uneasy. I felt like we were being watched or something like that, and looked over to one of my friends. She looked a little distressed, but we just shrugged it off. We walked only a few minutes more and found our spot. We started drinking, and basically spent like an hour and approximately 30 minutes of gossiping and having those deep talks while being drunk. I didn't drink too much, and neither did my other friend. We were just a little tipsy. Now, we forgot about the brief weird feeling we had while walking, until we heard something from the thick trees in front of us. Even though we were loud, we all heard it. It was this weird snicker/giggle. I got up from this tree log that I was sitting on, and just dragged my friends back a little. We had a fire going and 2 torches, but we still couldn't really see into that area. It wasn't that close to us. Think around 4 doors away if you placed them horizontally. So the fact that we heard that laugh was just insane to me. I pointed the flash straight into the area, and no one came out. I sat back down, and when I turned the flashlight off, there was a silhouette coming out. I switched on the flash to blind that person while my other friends did the same. We started yelling and getting ready to run when I saw the most horrifying sight of my life. It was this man who we'd never seen before. He had this plaster smile and his hair was covered in dirt. He was pale, and his eyes were almost like he wasn't looking at us, but just in our general direction. I can't explain it, but just textbook creepy. We all ran for it. My very drunk friends even managed to snap out of it. We got to my house. I lived the closest to the place, and said that we'd call the cops. We were really scared of our parents, but it didn't matter. We called the cops. They found nothing. Word got out and people pretty much strayed away from the paths at nighttime, and a couple of guys in our school managed to get their dads and all with guns to find the guy, but nothing ever came of it. Fast forward to like a month later. We didn't talk about it much and never did anything like that again. I got a pocket knife and pepper spray to keep. I went home after school and was exhausted, so I decided to take a nap. My dad was at work and my mom was visiting her sister. I suddenly woke up to this weird sound. We had one story and the walls were not too thick. I locked all the doors and even the windows out of habit. Still, fearing for the worst, I locked my room door and kind of looked out my window. There was nothing. I grabbed at a bat and my phone, heading out of my room. I looked at all the doors and everything was locked. There was this weird shuffling out of my house, and I just looked through the window of my living room. I kid you not, it was the same dude from the woods. He was just outside walking in this erratic, eerie way, which just sent me into a spiral. He somehow saw me and started saying hi there very loudly. I called the police, and after that I told him to leave. After that he started saying my name and all of my friends' names. The police questioned him. He had no history of mental illness. He had no clinical disorder. And after enough torture, he confessed to liking young women. He's in jail now. He'll probably get out in a couple of years. Edit. By torture, I meant interrogation. My dad has a friend who's a cop, and the cop told him the guy would scream when they asked him things. He was also guilty of attempted SA and harassment. But that is all I know of. Am I overreacting to a creepy coworker? I spoke with my husband and other coworker. They have differing opinions. I started working at my job a few months ago, and up until recently I hadn't seen this coworker who we'll call Twinkle Toes. He walks on his toes. Turns out, he was asked to work from home for the first few months I have been there, so he just came back to the office full time. He started to walk by my desk twice a day, which is nowhere near his. As he walks by, he stares at me like Hannibal Lecter would, and makes an occasional remark about me like, "Burning the midnight oil, huh?" and the like. The staring is so unnerving. My red flag went up, and I had never even met him officially yet. I didn't know his name until way later after someone else told me. Last week, Twinkle Toes finally approached the desk while my coworker, who we'll call Amber, was there having a conversation with me. She and I share a workspace, and he went over to her side to be a part of the conversation with us, but he stared at me the whole time, never looking away, even when she spoke directly to him and he answered. Before I left, I made it very clear that I am married, and said, "Well, I'm going home to my sick husband, and we'll make him some of that soup that we talked about." Then I walked out. Amber texted me shortly after. "Twinkle Toes just asked if you were single." She also mentioned in the text that he's never stopped to talk to her in the 2 years that they've worked there. I brushed the text off as him spacing out, but the following week he walked past staring several times, and no one from his department does this. I also left a few minutes later than normal that day, and as I headed down, he was in the middle of my path with no one else around, and just staring at me as I walked towards him. I said hi and waved. He said nothing back and wasn't moving out of the way. So before I ran into him, I turned to go back into the back offices. I waited a few minutes and then left through a different exit, and took the long way to my car, looking over my shoulder to make sure that he didn't follow me. The next day was different, and I moved even further away to assist some employees temporarily. Twinkle Toes came to where I was and talked to the employees at my desk while staring at me, just as I walked around. I said hi and waved. "You want to be nice and quiet, kid, just in case." But he just stared. When he finally left, the other employees say that he's never been to their area to talk, and they assumed that he was just there to watch me. I totally freaked out and asked my supervisor what to do. Apparently, he has a history of fixating on women and going too far on the awkward scale with them, but has never done anything to physically harm anyone. I also go on a walk around our property for my lunch, and everyone in the office that I work closely with knows this. He mentioned to the other employees at the different desk that he will go on a walk around the time that he thinks I take my lunches. She told me if I see him out there, to not let him catch up to me. I spoke with my manager and requested a security escort me or watch me go to my car. My manager said that they'll have a discussion with him, but in the meantime I need to just leave earlier and ask if Amber can go out with me to my car, but he gave me the number for security just in case. I told my husband, and he thinks that I'm making the right call with security, but I might need to be more aggressive towards Twinkle Toes at work. My coworkers think I need to be nice to him to keep it from getting worse. I've never had a conversation with this guy. I don't know anything about him except his tendency to stare, be in parts of the building where I'm at that are totally out of his way, and ignore everything I say. Part of me thinks he's just really harmless, socially awkward, and doesn't know how to handle his emotions. But he stares like he wants to do something evil, and doesn't respond when I talk to him directly, which is so unnerving. How can I de-escalate the situation? I love my job, and I don't want to feel uneasy about where I am for 8 hours of the day, but I don't want to be a nuisance for security, or other employees either. Update. After all this happened and I spoke to my manager again, he stopped coming to my desk and following me to other areas, and has also stopped the staring if/when I run into him elsewhere. He's on the spectrum, as I have now found out, and the company is trying to work with him on his behavioral issues. I don't think that I was overreacting because I don't know him that well before, but now I have more information and it seems that he's moved on. I wish I didn't feel uncomfortable around him, because I think outside of his fixation on me that he's a nice person and means well. I'm taking the advice to be more assertive and standoffish, so I don't encourage anything inappropriate. And if he does walk past me, I don't wave or say hi. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting a little, but this was super creepy. This morning at about 3 a.m., my roommate and I, both young women, watched a man park at the end of our driveway and come up to our door. He was shining a flashlight around, looking up and down and all around our door. He then walked over to the neighboring house and got back in his car and drove away. We were absolutely terrified, and I'm trying to find any reasonable explanation other than a potential robbery or something worse. I believe that he saw our security camera and that's why he left, but I'm scared that he was just scoping it out and is going to come back. Just a strange encounter at a strange hour. This happened to me about 2 to 3 years ago. When I was 16, I used to work at a fast food restaurant, and I live in a place where we all have seasons. At this point in time, it was winter, so it got dark pretty early, around like 5 to 6 p.m. I was called to come into work this particular day, but the weather was kind of bad, causing us to not have any customers. As a result, we had to close the store early. It was about 5:30 p.m. when my manager left, locking the store and making me wait outside for my ride. About 20 minutes had passed since she left, and I was really cold. So I decided regrettably that I would walk to a friend's house just a few blocks away, about a 10-minute walk, and wait for my ride there. The store I work at was on a busy street that was near a residential neighborhood. As I walk away from the store, I started walking down the residential street behind the store. I was walking on the sidewalk to the left of the street, as there is only one sidewalk on the right side of the street. If I walked on the right sidewalk, I'd only walk on it for a block. Then I'd have to walk the rest of the way on the road. There were also woods on that side of the road. It was convenient as well, because on the left side of the street was my store, and there were no streetlights. I walked about 3/4 of the block when I got this feeling that I was being watched. The block was long, making it about the equivalent of 2 blocks. The neighborhood was really dark, and at this point, I had pretty much reached the end of the block and was getting ready to cross the street, when I noticed a silhouette of someone walking on the right side of the road near the woods. About 5'9" to 5'10", looked maybe 180 to 200 pounds. I couldn't make out any features though. I'm the type of person who's very aware of their surroundings and slightly paranoid, as I've been followed, almost kidnapped, stalked, etc. You get the gist. So when I noticed him, I stopped walking and immediately got a sick feeling in my stomach. The man then noticed me and proceeded to walk slowly and yell out to me. He says, "Yo, come here, I want to talk to you." I say back, "No, I'm good, I'm only 16. Then I turned around and started walking back to my store. He continues to yell things at me, trying to convince me to come to him. At this point, something in me told me to run, and I did just that. As I'm running, I know I shouldn't have, but I turned my head to see if he was actually chasing me, and to my horror, he was. So I turned up the speed and ran as fast as I could. Thankfully, as I reached the store, my ride had pulled up, so I ran to the car. As I tried to get in, the door was locked. It took about 20 seconds for them to unlock the car, which felt like hours. But eventually I got in and just broke down crying. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of out of shape, so my back was hurting from breathing so hard, and I was all frazzled. This was the first time that I was chased on foot, and let me tell you, it's so much more scary, surreal, and intense being chased on foot than someone chasing you by car. Still to this day, I have added trauma from this incident, and it makes it hard to go anywhere by myself, especially in the dark. I'm a 25-year-old female, and I got my first apartment about a year ago. When I moved in, I was nervous, but excited about the opportunity. A few weeks after moving in, I bought a puppy so I wouldn't feel so lonely. My key broke in my door, so I had to call maintenance to come and fix it and let me into my apartment. The maintenance guy was instantly obsessed with my dog, but my dog was immediately afraid of him. I passed it off as nothing since she was a puppy, and figured she might act that way around everyone new. A few weeks later, my dishwasher broke, so I called maintenance to come out again. I was working on crate training my dog, so I stated it was fine for them to come out while I was at work, since she would be in her crate, and at most might annoy them with mild barking. Upon arriving home from work, I found several places on my carpet where my dog had had an accident. I thought I must have missed it before I left for work. I took her outside to go for a walk, and the maintenance guy stopped me and informed me that he let my dog out while working on my dishwasher, informed me that I was starving her by keeping her locked up all day, and that I wasn't a good pet owner. He then stated that he could take better care of her. I was too shocked to say anything. I talked to my dog's vet, and the vet confirmed that I was doing everything right for crate training my puppy. For several weeks after this, the maintenance guy would always stop to attempt to pet my dog when he saw us. I started taking different routes for walks and began driving to a nearby park to avoid him. This was when I realized that my dog didn't react to any other stranger the way that she reacted to him, hiding behind me and aggressively barking. He also began making comments about my appearance. I mentioned the occurrences to my parents when they visited. My mom thought it might just be me overreacting to living alone for the first time. She walked my dog with me around the complex. The maintenance guy stopped again and proceeded to make a joke about stealing my dog. When we got home from the walk, my mom stated that we were going to buy video cameras for the apartment. After that, things seemed to calm down. When I had maintenance issues, a different guy would come out. My dog would still be uneasy, but wouldn't react aggressively. Today, I had a maintenance issue again, and the original maintenance guy came out. My dog again reacted aggressively. I held her to help her calm down, and she began to relax, but still remained on high alert. The maintenance guy mentioned that he noticed my family had recently visited, and then proceeded to ask if they had left. He then started asking me if I was in school or working. I responded by saying that I was working. He then asked how much money I make. I began feeling very uncomfortable and laughed it off by stating that I didn't remember. He wouldn't accept this answer and kept pestering me. I responded by saying that I was bad with numbers. I'm an accountant. He then kept pestering me about how many hours I work, etc. My dog then began barking aggressively at him until he left. I honestly feel so creeped out right now. My lease is almost up. I'm moving to a different complex with a different management company, so I'm not sure if I should complain and risk them retaliating by holding my security deposit. I'm also nervous about filing a complaint and then living here for a few more weeks. I currently work the overnight shift for a major brand hotel. Like any other job I've had, most of the people I deal with are pretty normal and nice. Being the overnight shift, I get my fair share of weirdos too, of course. Although, most of the weirdos don't make me nervous, and I don't have to consider calling the police. If you have a working credit card and an ID and don't seem like you'll be a problem, I'll rent a room to you. All money is green, right? I'm only mentioning this to highlight that it's rare for me to turn people away when we have availability. Last night at 3 a.m., I swear they always come out in the witching hour. I had a walk-in guest who was an exception to both of these things. I saw this guy come in on the camera, so I went out to the front desk to greet him. Right away, I noticed he has the craziest eyes I've ever seen in my life. This guy was staring at me in a way that I cannot possibly describe. I swear he didn't even blink. He gave me that real bad, unmistakable initial gut feeling. As he approached with his crazy eyes, he said, "Why are you so nervous? Why is everyone so nervous? What's going on?" At that point, my guard is way up, but I was still willing to rent him a room. I said no one is nervous and asked him if he needed a room. I asked him for his ID and credit card, and he hesitated in a way that made me think that he was going to pull a weapon out. Right away, I turned around and retreated to the back office and closed the door. I observed him in the camera for maybe a minute, and then decided to go out again. He hands me the ID and credit card, and as I'm putting in his reservation, he points at the table behind me and said, "Who to sign that?" Instantly, I knew he just wanted me to turn around and look at the table, so I would turn my back to him. Without glancing away, I told him to leave, and he points at a cop badge in his wallet and said something like, "Did you see this? Are you okay? Is everything okay here?" Acting fake concern like I was possibly being victimized by someone else at the hotel. I assumed that the badge was fake, but didn't care either way and told him he had to leave. Side note, I noticed while he was standing there that he had urinated himself. Yup, this fat, old weirdo had a huge wet spot on his groin. My pants were dry. Guess he was more nervous than me, huh? I go into the back office again and watch him on camera. He walks out slowly, says something to our guest that was setting out in the lobby, and then kind of lingers in the parking lot for a minute. That's when I called the police because he had already made me so nervous. After he left the hotel, he went to the hotel across the street and drove through their lot. Then he looped around again and drove past our building real slow looking in. My guests and I were nervous, and he suggested he might come back with a weapon. He waited for his DD in a separate location. Luckily, that's the climax of my story. The cops came within 5 minutes. They always come quick here, and he was arrested across the street for DUI. I got a bit of joy when I saw them putting his truck on the tow. Turns out, the guy is a retired chief of police, confirmed by me, after finding a couple of articles online linked to him. I told everyone at work to be on the lookout for him. Also, I forgot to mention that this weirdo called 911 on himself while I was on the phone with them. I was still on the line with dispatch at 911, was on the phone with the person at the station, and I heard someone say, someone from that area just called and said they were a retired cop who just scared some people at a hotel or something like that. This is the type of stuff we hear about on the countless murder documentaries on all of the streaming services. So this happened back around 2014 or 2015. I was about 19 to 20 years old. I was a scrawny thing at 4'10", not much weight or muscle to myself. We had just moved to this town. My family and I checked the crime rate. It was pretty low, and so we thought that it was a safe town. Boy, were we wrong. So this town was about 1,000 people or so, and we just moved here a few weeks prior. Nothing bad had happened. One cold winter day, my parents decided to let me walk to the little store in town. It was about 3 blocks away, so like a 5-minute walk. I didn't personally own a cell phone at this time, nor did I have pants pockets on my pants. I took my parents' phone and card to get whatever we needed at the store. I had the card in my hand, and it was visible. Bad mistake looking back on it. I walked up to the store without incident. Didn't see these boys on the way up to the store. Got what I needed and left the store pretty quickly, putting the card into the grocery bag. At this point, the sun was setting. It wasn't dark outside, but the sun was past the buildings in town. I get between the store and an abandoned building with a library almost at the end of the block. I see 3 young boys probably between middle to high school age. I knew I had to go that way to go home, so I was forced to walk past these boys. At first, I didn't have a bad feeling, and they weren't saying anything to me. I honestly don't think that they saw me at first. Anyway, as I was almost to the library, the boys passed me now. They're between the library and the store at this abandoned place. As soon as my back was to them, I got a very bad feeling. That's when I heard one of the boys say, "You." Yeah, you. I looked back, and they were headed my way again. I just ignored them and didn't answer. I heard footsteps, but it was a distance away. Then I heard them say again, "You. Yeah, you, come here." Again, I ignored them. This time, the footsteps got louder and faster as they were jogging. One last time they said to me, "You. Yeah, you, come here." But this time louder and a lot more aggressive. At this point, the footsteps were at a run now, and almost right behind me. I looked back, and these 3 boys were almost on me, but not quite at arm's length. At this time, I got scared. I didn't have any weapons on me to defend myself. Nobody was on the road. I was all alone with these 3 boys. I didn't know what to do. So I gripped my parents' cell phone tighter, my other hand in a fist. I was ready to fight and use the phone as a weapon. As soon as these 3 boys were now within arm's length of me, an ambulance goes by. I remember looking at the guys in the ambulance. They were driving by really slow. They were looking at me, then looking at the 3 boys. I saw the passenger guy look at me and smile. Then they drove away. I looked back, and the 3 boys they had left and went away from me. I don't know why I didn't yell at the ambulance people for help. Maybe I was too shocked or scared. I called my family members, tell them what had happened, and asked if I could get a family member to come pick me up or meet up with me to finish walking me home. I don't remember what they said. but by the time the family member got out of the house, I was already home. Thankfully, they didn't follow me home either, but I was walking as fast as I could, gripping the phone tight and constantly looking over my shoulders, thinking the whole time, let me get home safe, or let a family member catch up to me. Thankfully, I didn't see them again after this incident. To this day, I do believe that the ambulance men saved my life. I had a really bad feeling about these boys. I think that they were going to rob me or worse. Also, being in a new town, I didn't really know my way around. I honestly kind of just ignored my gut feeling, because I could have crossed over onto the street, but I didn't. Now, I have good and better situational awareness, and I listen to my gut. It has never been wrong. My gut feeling has steered me in the right directions. This happened a while ago, back in late July/early August of 2022, at around 9 o'clock p.m., I think maybe slightly earlier. Me and my friend decided to take photos in the forest. Yeah, I know, dumb idea. Everything was going fine. Of course, slightly scary because, well, we're two girls in a forest and it's twilight. At around 9:40, my friend's mom calls her, saying that we should go back to her place because it's getting late. Understandable. We are going to her place. I ask her, can we take the shortcut out of the forest? And she says, all right. Our biggest mistake. While going through the shortcut, I see some guy in front of us. He was holding an axe in one hand and was wearing a horse mask. He was around 195 centimeters tall. He was slowly coming towards us. I take my friend's hand, because I'm thinking that we're all about to die, and I tell her, do not go there. There is a dude wearing a horse mask. She ignores me and continues walking towards him slowly. With no emotion, I take her hand and just force her to run to the longer exit from the forest. While running, I'm literally not hearing anything she's saying to me because I'm in a panic. While running, I see a random woman walking with two average-sized dogs. Yeah, I know I'm dumb for not warning her about the horse dude. So we finally escape the forest and are going to her place. While walking to her place, she's asking me a bunch of questions like what was that and stuff like that. And she also mentions hearing that the guy was running after us. So yeah, we go to her place and talk about what happened. To be honest, I wish that was the end of it, but it wasn't. In October of 2022, I'm casually browsing the Latvian news and see some articles about a dead person in the same forest that me and my friend were. Did we escape an axe murderer by a dude wearing a horse mask? I was 23, and I had a long-distance boyfriend. He would come and see me, and on this day we parked outside of a nature trail and fooled around in the car briefly before I exited. None of the vehicles in the lot appeared to be occupied, but I was wrong. I'm about to get out of the car and decide to grab my knife out of the bag before I start walking the trail. I normally wouldn't do that. I also decided to put a bigger t-shirt over my tank top. I said goodbye to my boyfriend and started down the trail. I wanted to walk before going home. This isn't a hidden trail. This is a populated area. If you run about a minute down the road from the trail entrance, you're outside of a business. As I'm walking, I start to sense that someone is behind me. I'm currently holding my knife in front of my body. I continue walking and finally look back to see a middle-aged man following me. As I pick up speed, he does as well. I tell myself I'm being paranoid. It's the middle of the day. How would he even do anything to me? Because he continues to follow and I see a bench coming up, I decide the best thing I can do is to hurry to the bench that is facing the trail and hold my knife out in front of me in an obvious way. I cannot express to you how shocked I was to see. When I sat down and he saw my knife, he put an even larger knife into his pocket. I couldn't believe it. He saw the face I made, and he ran off immediately to an adjacent trail that was deeper into the wooded area. I got up and started running the main trail he had followed me down. When I got to the parking lot, there was one vehicle, a truck, running, with no one inside. I'm guessing this was his vehicle. I continued running until I was in the middle of town. I don't know what to make of this. Surely if he got me there, someone would have heard or seen it. Are people really that bold? I also think that he may have confused me for a worker, because he may have seen me in the car. Thoughts? This happened to me around 2021 in India, around the COVID period where lockdowns were still very much effective. My dad used to live in another city, my brother was in college, and my mom had a government job, so she had to go to her office every day. So I was basically left alone from 10 a.m. to around 6 p.m. We used to live in an apartment unit, but it had two doors. One was the main door, and the other one was located in the biggest bedroom, basically my parents' room. The door was clearly locked with an actual lock from the outside, and it also had a metal sliding door, the one with the chain structure. I'm from India, so you can Google elevators to find out what I'm talking about. And it was also locked from the outside. We had a ring bell on the outside, but it was just connected to a small bulb in the bedroom. Sorry for this being so long, but you have to get the gist of the area. So one day around 12 p.m., I was in my room, which was basically adjacent to my parents' room, and I felt weird, so I just went to check their room. I went to the room to see the bulb blinking, i.e. someone was ringing the doorbell. My mom used to say to ignore it, because if it was someone we knew ringing it, they would know the real door. I stood there for a moment when the person started knocking really hard on the door, like it was straight up rattling. But the thing is, due to the metal gate in front of it, it would be very hard to put your hand inside to knock on the actual door. Even I couldn't put more than half of my palm in. I was also a teen back then, so I wasn't that big, and this man was straight up banging on it. I got scared and called my mom, who told me not to panic, but I was really weirded out, so I locked my parents' door with the lock that they had and went downstairs to chill in my brother's room. It was one of those days where my mom straight up wouldn't return till like 8 p.m., so I was alone for a really long time, and I was scared to even go upstairs. Around 6 p.m., our helper auntie came, and I was a little better than someone else was in the house. And during that time, I used to take private tuitions, and my teacher used to come around 7:30 p.m., so I felt better that I'd have people. Our main door had a big window just beside it, so whenever someone was at the door, we used to open the window to check who was there before opening it. But Auntie had the habit to open it without checking. Like, you memorize the timings of people, so you open it because you know that it'll be them kind of thing. Fortunately that day, when the doorbell rang, she opened the window, and then she came to my brother's room to tell me that I had a cake delivery. Thing was, I didn't, obviously. So I went out to check through the window. There was a man with a cap hiding his face holding a very small box. Now, a cake box is very square and big, right? Even a pound cake has a big box. And in India, we have a very small sweet box. So imagine a 100-gram sweet box being called a cake box. And I asked him who was the delivery for. He didn't give my name, not even of the company, just told me that it was for our flat. I called my mom and asked if she had made the delivery, and she didn't know what I was talking about. So the dude was just like, accept the box and open the door. And by a miracle, my teacher walked up the stairs and asked what was happening. The dude saw my teacher and ran up the stairs. We lived on the first floor, and we let our teacher enter. Later, when my mom inquired about a delivery guy coming to our flat with our security guard, he said he wasn't there at his post for around a half an hour when it happened. and we didn't have any CCTVs in our building, so no one saw him. It wasn't that scary maybe, but it did shake me up, and I did ask my mom to at least come quickly from her office on the next day, and I didn't stay upstairs when I was home alone anymore. We once found some young scouts, 9 to 11 years old, stumbling around in the woods after dark, completely lost, no lights, one sleeping bag between the two of them. They had taken a wrong turn into a dried creek bed that wasn't a trail, and just gotten completely lost. If they hadn't happened to be making a lot of noise stumbling around in the dark next to our tent, they would have had a really crappy night all alone in the woods. Luckily for them, we had helped some other lost kids earlier that day, and we got a look at their map. We happened to know where the group was staying and walked the boys back to their friends. Even 20 years later, I still feel bad for those boys. The younger kid was bawling his eyes out, and the older kid was just barely keeping his stuff together. What the heck was that scout leader thinking, letting all of these inexperienced little kids wander around with no supervision or guidance? I was hiking with my girlfriend, her sister, and her boyfriend in Hawaii in 2021. We parked our car at the end of the road about 200 feet away from the trailhead, behind the only other car at the end of the road, where another couple was getting ready to start the same hike. We briefly chatted with them as we got our shoes on and prepared our bags. They then started up the trail, and we followed maybe 10 minutes after they started. We figured we would maybe see them at the slide, which indicated the turnaround point. For context, the trail we were hiking led to a water slide deep in the mountains, which was the remnants of an old irrigation canal from the plantation era. The trail meandered through the rainforest, occasionally crossing and traversing the concrete irrigation canal, and led us to some large pipes spanning across a small valley, then directly into the mountain wall. This is where the trail forked. You could either follow the canal through the mountain in the dark, or traverse around the ridge to the slide. My girlfriend and I took the canal through the mountain, and her sister and boyfriend opted for traversing the trail. We both made it to the slide, and we didn't see the couple there. There were only 2 main trails that we knew of that connect to the slide, and we didn't see the couple returning from the slide in the opposite direction. We didn't think much of it at the time, because maybe they had taken a third route back, or had continued further up past the canal past the slide. But no one really does that based on the info from a few locals who have hiked the trail several times. We made our way back to the trailhead and still no sign of them. Their car was still there parked in front of ours. We still aren't sure what happened to them. They just totally vanished off the trail. Not super scary, but it definitely makes you wonder where they might have gone when considering the only ways to and from the trailhead. I just had a relatively creepy backpacking experience this weekend, which got me curious about what other folks have encountered while backpacking. I'll start sharing my experience. A friend and I did a brief 2-night trip out of Skycomosh, Washington, in the Central Cascades. We hiked in and set up camp at a beautiful subalpine lake. Everything was good up until dark, of course. I awoke around 1 a.m. to hear what sounded like branches breaking in the near distance. I initially thought that it sounded like branches on the ground being stepped on, but figured it could be branches breaking away from the tree too. To keep my freaked out mind from going wild, I told myself that it was probably just an elk. This went on until I finally fell asleep again. The same thing happened the following night, but to make things worse, I heard what sounded like the zipper on our rainfly being unzipped as slowly as humanly possible. or like something very small was being dragged across the fly of the tent very slowly. Either way, I flipped around on my horrifically squeaky inflatable pad in hopes of scaring off whatever it was, if anything at all. Needless to say, I didn't sleep that night, but thankfully found that the zipper was fully closed at dawn. I've heard that temperature changes can cause cracking sounds within the bark of trees, but then again, a Google search on branches breaking in the woods pointing me to Bigfoot, but who knows? Either way, this creeped me out. I've never once heard sounds like that when backpacking, and I'm often awake several times during the night on trips. I was on Poo Poo Point in Issaquah, Washington a couple of weeks ago, and I hear twigs breaking left and right from an area behind me. I figured it was a paraglider who landed short of the landing area and was coming up on the trail. Imagine my surprise when a bear popped up 15 feet away from me. We looked at each other for a few brief seconds, and I let out the loudest "Hey bear," and he trundled off. I was shaking for the next 10 minutes. I've run into a lot of bears in the Enchanted Valley, but when you don't expect one, they can be a bit interesting. Last year in summer, I decided to spend one night in the wild in a nearby forest. So I packed my stuff and some food and went to the place in the evening. It was only a half an hour walk from my flat, and it wasn't the first night out in the wild on my own without a tent. So I ate some dinner and put my sleeping place up. When it was dark, I started to sleep, but the night was very uncalm. Somehow I couldn't get very good sleep. I woke up all the time, probably because it was quite close to the city, and I could still hear cars and people partying. So at around 4 o'clock, I decided that I will pack my stuff up and go home, so I can at least get some good sleep. When I was on my way back, still in the forest, I saw a person, probably male, standing on the path that I wanted to go on. He was just standing there with the back to me, not moving or walking. This was already scary, so I tried talking to him, asked who he is and if he could turn around, but he didn't move at all. I continued talking to him, that he should please talk to me or turn around or do anything. I tried it in 2 different languages, but he didn't react at all. He was just standing there, not moving. I waited and talked to him for at least 10 minutes, really scared. Then at one point he started walking very slowly in the direction that I wanted to go to. So I know, if I go the same way, I rather had to walk very slow or overtake him and be close to him at one point. So I decided to walk another way, which was a detour of at least 30 to 45 minutes. In the end, I knew that our paths will cross one last time, but at this time I could already see the city. But luckily, I didn't meet him again. He was probably high, but it was very scary since it was in the night and dark, and he wasn't reacting or moving at all. I was hiking with a buddy near Tupper Lake. We were sitting in a fire tower, watching the sunset, and had just said goodbye to a young couple. About 2 minutes after they leave the peak, a blood-curdling scream fills the air. Keep in mind, they walked for 2 minutes. We were 50 feet in the air, and the wind was blowing towards them at about 20 miles per hour. My buddy and I looked at each other scared out of our minds, with zero idea of what to do. We came for the sunset, so we stayed for the sunset. Figuring if it was our last time to leave this earth, we would do so with the image of an ADK sunset fresh in our minds. After the sun ends, we start walking down the trail with sticks in hand, just freaking out. We walk for about 5 minutes and figure that we're probably good and just scaring ourselves. The rest of the hike down was unnerving at best. The woods are never comfy at night past the range of your light. We get to the bottom and my buddy says, "Yo, there's another car here." When we came, there was only one car, a red one with a dude in it. The other girl showed up separately. She was the one that screamed. Her car was still here. His was gone. We ran to our car, hop in and start driving home. At this point, we were seriously considering calling the cops. As we're driving, we are passed and it's the red car. I swung the car around, followed him back to the lot, and drive past the lot as his interior cab lights turn on. It's just him. No girl. To this day, we have no idea what happened. What we do know is that we told the guy in passing that we're gonna camp Bridge Brooks Island, and the next night we did. We swore that we were being watched the entire night, with a big scare coming from our boat hitting rocks and sounding like a guy running up on us. I took an ill-advised winter hike in a storm. The wind was coming off the peak and down the ridge that I was ascending. There was snow on my ridge that was about shin deep, and we had about 800 feet to the summit. It was getting dark and the wind lulled. We both heard a long, terrible scream up ahead, really tortured. The wind picked up again. We rejected the attempt and made our way back to the tent. I thought I could hear a helicopter in and out of the wind gusts, but in the dark, couldn't see anything. The next afternoon, there was a news report of one dead after falling from a ridge during a military exercise. It was from the summit ridge line that we were heading for. I heard that man fall. Back in 2015, I was on a hiking trail in Arizona. I have hiked a lot in worse terrains in Europe, so I wasn't too worried about doing it alone. It was almost getting dark, and I was at an eerily deserted stretch for what felt like hours now. Suddenly I heard a kind of music. As I kept going, I realized that it was someone whistling. It gave me the creeps, but the idea of company relieved me a bit too. Soon enough, I saw a man in front of me walking the same direction. He was wearing a t-shirt and pants, which was surprisingly inadequate, especially for the impending night. I passed him by. He was the one whistling indeed. Turned to say the customary greetings. He looked up, deadpan, and without a word turned back down towards the ground and kept whistling. He was walking slowly on an almost trance-like manner. I quickly averted my gaze forward, and almost abruptly the whistling stopped. I turned back to see what happened, and there was absolutely no one on the trail. Zilch. Didn't even feel like anyone had been there. Needless to say, I freaked out. I made it back without any further issues, but I still think about what I saw and heard that night. I had a stare-off with a bobcat. I awoke early before dawn and made a cup of coffee, then took a quiet walk among the huge boulders around my camp. I came around one of them and locked eyes with a large kitty, probably 45 pounds, who froze in place as I did. We were about 6 to 7 feet apart. His eyes dilated. He crouched, ears back, and we stared deep into each other's eyes. I was afraid that if I dropped eye contact, he'd spring at my throat. He looked freaked and defensive, ready to fight. He was probably thinking the same thing about me. After no movement from either of us for way too long, I took a risk and dropped my eyes and head for less than a second. When I glanced around, he was gone. Poof, like a ghost. My dog right at my side had no clue. Never saw it, smelled it, or chased it. I was not surprised by my dog's ability to be fooled by the cat's perfect natural camouflage. But not to smell it? It was right in front of his face. There was a huge mountain lion up in the Three Sisters Wilderness area. His territory is large. My doctor saw it across the road and said it was gigantic. On a solo backpacking trip up the wilderness boundary, I found big cougar tracks where it had leapt after a deer or elk during the chase. The paw prints were about 20 feet apart, and I camped there for the night. I was hiking alone with my dog. It was at the beginning of the hike, so I was still very close to a town. I met a family walking together. A man, a woman, and a kid. The man says hi to me, and it's obvious that he wants to talk, so I stop, assuming he wants to ask about my dog's breed or something. My dog smells him, and he says to my dog, "Ah, you know who the master is here." What the heck? Then he asks me, "Are you not afraid to walk alone?" I tell him no, I'm not. Then he asks me, "Are you sure? You're a young woman alone. Are you not afraid of being attacked?" Well, now I am, thanks. I tell him that I'm close to town, so no. He then told me how I shouldn't be without a man and keeps asking me, "Are you not scared of being assaulted or killed by someone?" At this point, I wanted to ask him if by someone he meant him. I pointed out that I had a big dog with me and told him how my dog was protective and wouldn't hesitate to defend me if something goes wrong, which is true, but I mostly said it to scare him in case he had bad intentions. I made eye contact with the woman and kid at some point, and it was obvious that they were embarrassed. Eventually I left, and I never saw them again. This all took place in a rural area in France, not a place that's especially dangerous for women. Another scary thing is that I saw a scary, massive boar. It took me a minute to understand what that creature was, but that's not as scary as the creepy dude. I got stalked by a family of brown bear on a trail once. Thankfully, they mostly kept their distance, but they were definitely following me and I couldn't figure out why, other than that they were potentially starving and I was potentially dinner. Turns out, I had a massive bag of homemade trail mix in my pack and carried it with me on the hike instead of leaving it in the bear bag back at camp. I found it when I stopped to have some water, and at that point, the bears were getting ballsy. Closer and closer each time I tried to take a break. I dumped that trail mix out where I sat and climbed up the nearest cliff. If those bears went right for the trail mix, they didn't follow me further. It's how keen their sense of smell is. Black bear wouldn't have really concerned me. They're super skittish creatures. Brown bear, on the other hand, I don't know why, but those creatures don't give a crap and will tear you limb from limb looking for a single gummy vitamin that you forgot in your pocket. In the late 90s, I was in my junior year of high school and hiking up Usery Mountain in the East Mesa, Arizona, with my best bud and two girls that we liked. We reached the Wind Cave at the top, but wanted to keep going, so we scrambled up the summit to take in the view. My friend was sitting on a rock and noticed an old rusty Altoids tin box and picked it up. Inside were two folded up pieces of white paper, which he spread out on the rock. The first page was a crude sketch of the view from the exact spot drawn in pencil, with the caption, "The last view from Name's eyes," with the date, I believe it was only some months or a year past. The second page was an apology letter listing people in this person's life and things they were sorry to have said or did to them. We surmised that it was a self-unaliving note and started searching the backside of Usury for anything, something, remains, clothes, more clues. There was nothing. This was the late 90s, and internet search was not really a thing yet, so we went to the Central Mesa Library to sort through the microfiche files, skimming through newspapers a little after the date, on the drawing, or any lost person notices or any news related, and again, nothing. But it was fun feeling like I was in Encyclopedia Brown for an afternoon. Some years later, my friend moved to another part of the United States and hasn't really kept in touch. But I often wonder if he still has the 10, and if he ever found the person's identity using modern research methods. Unsatisfying end to the story, I know, but it was definitely a little creepy and a little sad. Plus, I gotta use the word microfiche. East Mesa has a surprising amount of culty aspects that I experienced growing up. I should probably write them all down. I was hiking in northern Ontario through an old mining road. Years of neglect had fallen tons of trees. My partner and I had 27-pound packs on, so ducking or going over fallen trees was time-consuming and tiring. We got to the point on the trail where we needed to go south to the lake. There was a beach there we spotted on Google Earth. Thinking nothing of it, we head straight through the forest. No path. For those that have been through boreal forest, you know what I'm talking about. I'm up front for the first part. I step near a conifer truck. I'm 2 feet away from the trunk, but my foot disappears into a hole. I don't lose my balance and quickly recover, but use the nearby stick to poke around the area. It's just a fake top with broken branches and brown pine needles. Don't know how far it went down. Came to the realization there are a lot of holes in this forest. We kept our distance from any other conifer trunks and made it safely to our destination. It was worth the hike, and we made it safely home. If something bad had happened, we were many miles away from the main road, and tough hauling back through the old mining road. Great memory, but it was scary. I posted a review on All Trails for a snowshoe I did in the mountains. I was the first one up that trail after a pretty good-sized snowstorm, breaking trail pretty much the whole way. A couple days later, somebody tracked me down on Facebook from that review and started asking questions. I thought it was kind of weird, but it turned out that she was trying to track down a guy who had hiked down the trail a few days before. He went up with just his dog and basic gear, but no snowshoes, and got caught in the storm. The storm was so powerful that it shut down a ski hill in the area. Total whiteout. Dropped a lot of snow very fast. The dog showed up on the highway 10 miles away 2 days later. I was the next person up the trail after him, so they were hoping I'd seen some sign of him, but I hadn't. Turned out he'd died up there. Most likely he'd gotten off trail in the whiteout, got bogged down in the deep snow and froze. Moral of the story is be prepared out there, especially in the mountains. Double especially in the winter. I was a volunteer working at a camp in Velipohe, Albania. One night, my friends and I decided to go to some beach bars to party. We bar hopped a little and eventually ended up in one a bit too far from camp, a bit further from the coast behind a big forest. When 2 a.m. hit the clock, I felt tired, so I decided to go back to the camp. No one else was willing to, so I ended up walking alone. I decided to take a shortcut through the forest. It was pitch dark, so I used the flashlight on my phone. I illuminated the path and then I saw it. It was a body. I startled and started moving the light slowly, only to reveal 10 more bodies lying on the ground. Fortunately, all of those bodies were alive, just sleeping. It turned out that the forest was full of homeless gypsies who were just living there. I was relieved that no one was dead, but I was also a bit scared of being robbed. Obviously, I don't mean to be racist, but one of those guys are fine and nice, but also poor and unfortunate. They were usually making a living by playing music on nearby beaches. However, at the same time, I saw their children pickpocketing the tourists. But the night got even scarier. When I left the forest safely, I started walking on the promenade. I started looking at the stars as the night sky in Velohohe is simply gorgeous. I was passing a lot of rabid dogs on the way. I didn't think much of it at the moment, because they were just scavenging near the rubbish bins and piles and just kept walking. Suddenly I start feeling uneasy. Something wasn't right. I turned around, and wouldn't you know it, the dogs were following me. The pack was getting larger and larger, and it wasn't just a funny parade with cute puppies. They started forming an open circle formation, just like hunting wolves in movies. I immediately started walking a bit faster, looking around for any large stick to defend myself. The dogs accelerated their pace as well. Encouraged by their numbers, some of them started growling. Then I heard loud barking and tapping. I quickly turned around and saw one of the dogs charging me, with about 10 to 15 dogs walking behind it quietly or growling. I did the only thing I could think of, which was shouting and stomping aggressively. That immediately discouraged the pack. All the 10 to 15 dogs stopped and looked at me quietly, still remaining in the circle formation. The charging one retreated and barked even louder, probably to cover its lack of courage. I slowly turned my back and started walking, but then the dog charged me again, and again I shouted and tried to look aggressive. This worked again, and became a routine for the rest of my way back to camp, which was fortunately just 10 more minutes. Needless to say, I was very scared that I was going to be eaten, or at least severely bitten by a pack of wild dogs. But thank God, nothing bad truly happened. I like to hike solo. One time I was hiking around a trail system at the base of my local mountain with my 2 dogs, not far from civilization, and not a technical trail. It was really more of a walk in the woods. I had hiked that trail many times before, almost daily. The worst part of the trail was when you had to pass by this little lean-to that someone had put against a pine tree, maybe 150 feet off the side of the trail. I always got creeped out by it because someone easily could have been in it. But after having walked the trail so many times, I got pretty acclimated to it. Well, lo and behold, this time my fears came true. This time, a lumbering, jacked, unkempt man with a very unhinged look in his eyes, and a huge machete comes striding out of the lean-to as I'm passing by. I'm a pretty small gal. I'm completely unarmed, and I'm completely unprepared for this. He starts walking alongside me, very close to me, telling me how he had just been released from prison, how lonely he is, how confused he is about having to get back on his feet after spending time locked up, how angry he is at everyone for letting bad things happen to him. My heart is beating out of my chest, but I manage to stay calm on the exterior. There's no one around to scream for. There's no way that I'm going to overpower this guy. I'm at a total loss about the right thing to do. I just gently and kindly talk to him about his troubles, share about what I was going to do with the rest of my day, which includes going home to my family, and eventually I'm able to tell him that I need to turn around and head back because I'm running out of time, at which point he just books it back deeper into the woods. He easily could have assaulted and murdered me at that moment. I have no idea what kept him from causing me any harm, but I am grateful. Years ago, I was taking a short hike around a lake where I lived, something I must have done 100 times before. Nice day, but during the middle of the week, so no one else was around. About 10 minutes into it, I got the sense of someone behind me and turned around. When I did, I saw a man about 30 feet behind me walking very quickly in my direction, with his eyes right on me. Strange thing was that as soon as I turned around and looked at him, he immediately turned around and walked back the way he had come. I got the creepiest sensation that I had been in immediate danger from the guy, and that the man turned back the other way because he had lost the element of surprise. I waited about 20 or so minutes and then got out of there. I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't turned around. My best friend and I went for an early trail run one morning in the summer. Ours were the only cars in the parking lot, and there are no other trailheads for miles. As we were running up the mountain, we noticed something ahead of us. A tall person was walking very slowly toward us, swishing their arms in front of them side to side. It was a hot day, and he was wearing a hooded jacket. Their sleeves were long enough to touch the ground, and their hood was tied over their face, so they must have only had a small hole to look out of. We passed this person with no issue, but it's the creepiest encounter I've ever had on a trail. I learned that I'm definitely the kind of person that would trip my friend and leave them for dead if the moment called for it. I was hiking Cerro Chaparro in Costa Rica last May, 42-kilometer trail that I started at midnight and finished at 5:30 p.m. There is a lodge at the base of the trail. Once I finished and got back, there were cops with a family there. I ate dinner and went to bed, not knowing what was going on. The next day, I found out that a woman who was hiking with 2 family members had disappeared on the hike. She had apparently been hiking ahead of the other 2 for a short period when they heard her scream. When they caught up to where she had been, she wasn't there or anywhere to be found. They searched and called out as long as possible until they had to head down the trail to seek help. They found her body 4 days later. She had fallen off of a large cliff. Turns out, I passed her dead or dying body unknowingly at some point on the hike. A buddy of mine and I were hiking Mount Washington in October. We are seasoned and prepared hikers. It was a windy, cold day, but we had a great time. Managed to also bag Monroe between sets of clouds, just obscuring everything. We knew that we'd be hiking in the dark and planned accordingly. We were hiking down the Jewel Trail with the headlamps on, and out of the darkness we hear, "Hello." My buddy and I basically both crapped ourselves. Sitting there is a young woman and her boyfriend in sneakers and light jackets, freezing. No backpacks, no water, no nothing. We start to ask questions and they only speak French. My buddy thankfully is a native speaker, so we get the whole story. They started hiking up Jewel at 3 p.m. From there, they managed to fumble around and then they lost the light. This was 2008, so smartphones weren't terrible, but not great. It didn't take them long to blow their batteries out trying to use them as flashlights. Too afraid to go down the hill in the dark, they did the sensible thing and just stopped and stayed on the trail. We gave them water and food in our spare layers and started back down the trail. We got them back to their car and they thanked us profusely. I always wondered how people could die in the whites. This was the first time seeing how unprepared people will gleefully go down the trail without a care. When I was 11, I went camping with my mom, her boyfriend, and my little brother outside of Las Vegas in the middle of the desert. We went arrowhead hunting one morning, and during our hike, we stumbled upon a full human skeleton laying on a blanket, kind of tucked under a bush, laying on their back like they fell asleep and never woke up. My boyfriend knelt down and prayed over the remains, and then we walked back to the campsite silent, everyone in complete shock. Got the ranger. Boyfriend got into helicopter to show him where the remains were. Turned out to be a presumed self-unaliving of a young male. He had been missing for almost a year. It was suspicious that the whole skeleton was still in contact, though. That image is forever burned in to my brain. Back in the early 90s, I did an overnight small chunk of the Appalachian Trail with 2 work friends. It was rainy, miserable. I had a cheap sleeping bag and an ancient external frame backpack that made me worry about being a lightning rod at that elevation. We got lost on the way out and started complaining to each other, and settled into grumpy silence. We hadn't seen anything the whole time, but then we could hear somebody coughing. Like a really wet, croupy, hacking cough. Turns out it was a single adult man and a kid. They were wearing rain gear, but didn't otherwise seem outfitted for even a short jaunt, like us, much less a longer hike. The kid looked miserable, just coughing and coughing, and we passed each other in silence. I was basically a kid myself, maybe 19. But the older I have gotten, the more that I think about this 5-minute snippet of my life. I have kids now. That child had glassy eyes and a flushed face, a sure sign of fever. His hair was stuck to his face from the rain. I still remember that sad little resigned look in his eyes as we passed. We were miles and miles from any kind of access point or way station. I never would just keep walking now. The dad, I really hope it was their dad at least, and I would have had a frank conversation. Did they need help? Dry socks? A snack? Was he aware that his kid needed to get off the trail ASAP? Etc. I still think about it a lot. I've got 3 crazy experiences. In college, my buddy and I are camping at the Mount Washington lean-tos to have 3 days of spring skiing at Tuckerman's Ravine. If you don't know the area, there's no lifts. You hike up a very steep and relatively short run. The camping is 2 to 3 hours from the parking lot. We wake up to a beautiful morning with not a cloud in the sky. Unfortunately, the service report says 50-mile-per-hour winds at the ski area. The mountain has the highest wind speeds recorded on Earth. We decided to take a short hike and then hopefully ski in the afternoon. After an hour, we can still see the lean-to. Clouds roll in, and it's a complete whiteout blizzard. We're above the tree line with no markers. We end up coming down the wrong side, hiking for hours in sometimes chest-deep snow. We finally hit a road and walk another few hours and find a motel. We beg for a room, and after some cajoling get one. The next morning we hitchhike 20 miles back to the base parking lot, climb up for hours to get our skis and camping gear. There's a raging windstorm at the lean-tos, and we have to ski slide, slip down the icy trail to the parking lot. A few years later, my girlfriend, now wife, are cross-country skiing in Vermont in the spring. It's a one-way trip from a car we left back to my brother's car. We have a map and compass, and we're following the long trail markers on the trees. It has recently snowed, so it's only our tracks. The prior summer, the trail has been moved, not on our map, but they leave up some of the old tree markers. We become lost and decided to settle in for the night. I dug a deep pit to build a fire. At about 10, the pit collapsed and put the fire out. It's pitch black, and we dug out some snow caves, but my inner brain was rebelling. Just then, the moon rose, and I could strap on the skis and collect more firewood. We were rescued by volunteer snowmobilers. My brother had called the police at about 3 a.m. It took 3 hours to get us back to our car. Lastly, we were hiking in the Angeles National Forest, and I had a baby in a backpack. We saw a mountain lion. My wife yelled, "Run," but I calmed her quickly and we slowly backed away. When we were a safe distance away, she took the baby like a football and sprinted down the trail. I saw her meet a small group coming up. When I got to her, I asked if she had warned them, and she said coldly, "No, I wanted to have someone between us and the lion." Her maternal instinct seemed to have overrode common courtesy. Thankfully, there was nothing on the news that evening. I grew up in Orange County, California, but there were some real wild areas around us, believe it or not. In high school, we went to this place called Black Star Canyon in the Cleveland National Forest. Big, densely wooded area of oak that stretches from OC to San Diego, almost to the border. Even contains Marine Corps Camp Pendleton. Anyway, we had been told that it was haunted growing up. Turns out, true story, there was a tribe up there that was slaughtered in the 1800s by hired fur trappers because they kept stealing the Mexican ranchers' horses for meat. Enough said for a bunch of dumb high schoolers. So we plan a night hike to this place. My friends and I did stuff like this all the time, but I consider myself pretty skeptical, and luckily most of us were pretty level-headed. The area is pretty well known for mountain lions too, so we were all on guard and in agreement to turn around at any given sign, even if just one of us wanted to. So the way the trail works, you park at a forestry gate and start to walk a long asphalt narrow road that's mostly dirt from where there were sparse houses in the 50s and 60s, before the floods washed them out and the land was committed to National Forest Service, eventually turning to full hiking trail. Along this road is a line of barbed wire as well, with all kinds of signs warning you not to cross. So here we are, typical idiots walking on a road on a hardly slivered moon, pitch black night, after midnight, and not using our flashlights to add to the flare. Well, as we go and adventure deeper and deeper down this road, which we'd never been on before, mind you, I keep seeing what appears to be a cowboy leaning on the wooden fence posts, holding the barbed wire. Just kind of leaning on it, but distinctly looking at us. I'm talking full-blown cowboy-brimmed hat, just leaning. But it's just a silhouette out the side of my eye, and every time I look straight on, there's nothing. I'm telling myself if I'm logical and push it off as a trick of the eyes to keep my cool. But I keep seeing this guy every 10 or so posts, but I don't say a thing to the guys. We get to a point where we've been walking for over an hour and debate on heading back just because of the time. Then my friend goes, "Yeah," and I keep thinking I'm seeing a cowboy along the fence line. No crap, I felt my stomach drop out of me. I couldn't believe it. These were plain wooden fence posts, maybe a typical 4 foot or so tall, with mostly field behind them. No way that looks like a person. So I open up about it also, and we all agree to turn around. Just then, my other buddy starts flipping out, ripping his shirt off and screaming about getting stung. We're all kind of confused looking at him like he's crazy, but he insists that a bee or something just stung him. So we turn our lights on his back to look and watch as 3 distinct scratches form, stretching from his shoulder diagonal to the opposite hip, even drawing blood. We were done, needless to say, after that, but made it back to the car without further incident. You can probably argue that the shadow was a coincidence in the dark, and shapes playing tricks, sure, I'll give you that. But throw in the scratch in a way that we watched happen right as we're discussing this cowboy, and in a way we couldn't do to himself, and none of us standing in a circle did it to him. I believe there was something going on. This area ended up being used by Jack Osborne's show, Haunted Highway, on his pilot episode. It's pretty cool, and I've been back since, but only in the day. California has more to it than you'd imagine. This is just one story out of many that I've experienced out here. I was walking through a not so popular or well-known trail. It wasn't marked very well, so we got turned around a few times, and there really wasn't a lot of signs that people went on this trail often. Most paths were tough to see if they were even trails or were just wandering. Then we saw what looked like a dense area of trees and what looked like a path, so we head straight towards it. It was a well-traveled path, just in this little area. We take a turn and see some strange, shiny, reflective objects in the tree. We cautiously round the turn, and then as far as we could see, about 30 yards on the only straight path were Christmas ornaments. I mean, there had to be hundreds of them. Really creepy ones and some standard. Some looked personal, but it wasn't the oddity of some of them that was the sheer amount of them on an unmarked trail in the middle of the woods after we got turned around a bit. That was probably the weirdest stuff I've ever experienced. Looked it up on all the trails after we made it out, and there were no comments on that trail about Christmas ornaments. The hiking path was along a small stream. During heavy rain, that stream would turn from a 2-meter wide shallow creek into a 20-meter wide river, so it wasn't unusual to come across random trash that had been washed downstream. First, I passed a child's lunchbox, then a small jacket or sweater, then a child's backpack with a name and address prominently printed on it with permanent marker, then a plastic garbage can. You can clearly see that there was something in the can. It was wrapped in black garbage bags, but they were torn, so you could see what looked like clothing underneath. It was pretty far out, so I wanted to make sure before turning around and calling the police. Thankfully, it was just a bag of garbage. I was hiking out of a canyon, and as I approached the mouth of it, I heard a repetitious thumping noise that got louder and louder the closer I got to the mouth. Standing at the mouth of the canyon, I started looking around for what the source of the noise might be. I had some binoculars, and as I scanned up above the canyon, I spotted someone dressed in a Grim Reaper costume beating a drum. I have no idea what was going on. This isn't my story, but it's one that someone told me. They were in some very, very remote part of California and were about to enter a forest. Near the edge, close to a rock and behind some trees, were 2 people wearing all white, a man and a woman. They simply stared. When he tried to say hi and greet them, they didn't respond but instead just kept on staring. This was in the morning. At night, he noticed his food was missing and there were 2 human footprints that went all around his tent. 3 days later, he hears whispering around his tent in the middle of the night. Another day later, as he keeps looking back because of the previous incident, he sees 2 white dots following him about 3 miles behind him. They followed him for around 100 miles. That night, he purposefully hid his tent far off the trail. They still found him and lit a light directly at the tent. Dude took off running and they proceeded to chase him. Eventually he hid and could see them with their flashlight just looking for him. He left all of his gear and eventually got to a town where he contacted the police. The police said that similar incidents had occurred from different people, yet they never found anyone. People were also mysteriously disappearing in the forests. Dude made it out and went back home. I saw a full YouTube about it from Mr. Ballin. It definitely gave me the chills. Just today, my friend and I were hiking on some abandoned and used land. It's really beautiful, with lakes, cliffs, and tons of trees. The hike was going really well, but close to dark, it turned around. My friend whispered to me that they had been thinking of skinwalkers and couldn't stop. This got me thinking of the same, and we decided to head back to the car to eliminate any risk. A few minutes into the hike back, we both got horrible feelings, and it became apparent that we were not alone. We kept making our way back to the car as fast as we could, but it kept getting worse. Both of us experienced blurred vision, and the air suddenly got thick and had a hum to it. It also became incredibly hard to move, and we both experienced an intense urge to lay down and stop hiking. We came across an area we hadn't hiked through, but was adjacent to where we were. And there were so many deer prints in every direction, as if deer had been rapidly pacing there, and human footprints on the other side of that scramble. There wasn't a clear starting point to the footprints, and no evidence of any other hikers for miles. The trek back to the car seemed to take 5 minutes and 3 hours simultaneously, so we have no clue how long it actually took. Neither of us have felt this sense of dread, or have been this disoriented before. Do you think we had a close encounter with a skinwalker, or was it something else entirely? I don't have the background knowledge to say exactly what it could be. We're in eastern Kansas if that helps. Any information or ideas are appreciated. Note, I'm not trying to offend anyone in my story. I'm simply telling the events that I experienced. My friend was thinking of skinwalkers, and I am simply looking for advice or ideas as to what I could have experienced. Whatever it was very scary and not a good experience. I said in my post that I did not have the knowledge or experience to claim it to be anything specific, and I hope that doing so would clarify that I was not trying to offend anyone. Thank you to all who have given ideas or kind criticisms of my wording. I really appreciate all of it. I was hiking in Willamette National Forest on a trail that I am very familiar with. I had my 2 dogs with me, a hound and a lab, and we had just got up a really steep hill and I sat down for a rest. My dogs are usually just cruising around, sniffing out little critters and enjoying themselves. Suddenly, one of my dogs starts growling and staring down the trail where we had just come from. Just like that, they both get up right next to me and start to growl, staring down the trail. It's not a particularly bushy area, so I can see pretty far, and I don't see anything. But the dogs were sure that there was something there, and I believed them. Maybe a cougar. After a while, they calmed down, and we kept going and looped back on another trail. I had a pocket knife with me that I carried out for the next few miles, but we got back okay. They have never acted like that before or since. This happened yesterday. My brother and I went for a hike to stave off cabin fever from self-isolating. We chose a pretty remote trail to lower the risk of coming into contact with other people. I was walking ahead of my brother, and the gravel on the track was making our footsteps sound really loud. Deep in thought, I was listening to the rhythm of his footsteps behind me. About 20 minutes in, I started hearing other footsteps starting off faint and getting louder, until they were the same pitch as his, but they were much faster, like a running rhythm. They suddenly came to a halt, and I could hear the motion of someone stopping on gravel. That sudden, sharp, rocky sound, if you can imagine it. I assumed there must have been someone running or jogging on the track, and sure enough, I saw a shadow to the side of me appear, which looked like a person's head next to mine, as though they were right behind me. I stopped and turned to let them pass because the track was narrow. However, when I turned around, it was just my brother staring back at me. He was confused as to why I'd stopped, so I asked if he was running a second ago, and he said no. I asked if there had been anyone behind him, and he said that he wasn't aware of anyone. I thought it was strange, but just let it go and carried on. About 5 minutes later, we came around a corner and there was this smell of just pure death, like a really strong off-meat smell. We figured it was a dead animal and kept going. We reached the hike lookout about 20 minutes later, chilled out for a bit, and then headed back. We passed the death smell, and then around the exact spot where it happened before, I started hearing running sounds again. I ignored it this time because it was starting to freak me out, and just picked up the pace to get back to the car. I told my mom, and she joked that the death smell must have been a dead jogger, and I was being haunted by them, to which I laughed at the time. But now I'm wondering, what if it was? Maybe I should have investigated the smell. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.